Hello, friends. This is Scott Monty. Stand by for commentary.
Welcome to the Full Monty, where you'll be exposed to commentary and analysis from the week's digital news. You give us 15 minutes, and we'll save you hours. And now, here's your host, Scott Monty.
Hi, and welcome to the Full Monty, an audio companion to the newsletter of the same name. Each week, I pick a couple of the more pressing issues and inject insight, opinion, and wit into this 15-minute show that's sure to give you a better sense of what's affecting the industry. Maybe you'll agree with me, maybe you won't, but I hope it makes you think. This week, fundamental mistakes made by the Olympics Committee and so-called social media experts. Are these the modern or ancient Olympics? It's always amusing when some well-intentioned bureaucrat tries to bend the will of the internet to their own way. The latest examples hail from none other than the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, amid the 2016 Rio Olympics. It all began early last week when there was a dress rehearsal for the opening ceremonies with 3,000 people in attendance. And before the event began, the crowd was warned not to take any photographs. Well, as you can imagine, that's all the encouragement they needed. Within minutes, Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram, and the like were all flooded with preview images of the opening show. I guess the organizers had never heard of the Streisand effect. Oh, you've never heard of the Streisand effect? Okay. Well, it's when you attempt to hide, remove, or censor some information, and it has the unintended consequence of actually publicizing that information more widely. It's named for Barbra Streisand, who attempted to suppress photographs of her home in Malibu in 2003 and inadvertently drew further public attention to it. Now, before we go any further, two things. One, I am not a lawyer, nor do I play one on TV. Two, many of the larger sporting events, like the Super Bowl, the World Series, and obviously the Olympics, have advertising guidelines that prohibit brands from mentioning the names of these events on social media. They reserve those rights only for those brands who are paying for sponsorships. However, they typically don't restrict the use of the names of these events for members of the press who are freely reporting on the events. Well, things got a little tricky with the Olympics this week. Because NBC is the official broadcast partner of the Rio Olympics, the IOC has cracked down on exactly what can be shared and by whom. First, you'll note that NBC isn't providing any live streaming content. Even after the big launch of Facebook's live video over the last year, the network is still driving people to its television programming. Why? Well, to get you to watch the ads, of course. But the thing is, this isn't anything new. While there may be additional platforms on which to share content, NBC and the IOC are behaving exactly as they did at the London Olympics 4 years ago. Only this time around, the IOC wasn't taking any chances with its policy. Here's the statement on news access rules applicable to the broadcast of the games of the 31st Olympiad. And I quote, "Olympic material must not be broadcast on interactive services such as News Active or Sports Active or any other related video on-demand services, which would allow the viewer to make a viewing choice within a channel and to thereby view Olympic material at times and programs other than when broadcast as part of a news program as set out in Clause 1 above. Additionally, the use of Olympic material transformed into graphic animated formats such as animated GIFs, GFY, WebM, or short video formats such as Vines and others is expressly prohibited." End quote. No GIFs! No GIFs, because we don't want too many people watching a 5-second soundless moving image over and over at the expense of missing that tear-jerking Coca-Cola commercial. Speaking of live video, NBC had its own reasons for not broadcasting some of the events live. One is, of course, they want to be sure to capitalize on ratings by airing it during prime time. The other, I thought, was more curious. Several popular events, gymnastics and swimming, in addition to the opening ceremonies, will be broadcast on tape delay. When asked about this, NBC's chief marketing officer, John Miller, said, "The people who watch the Olympics are not particularly sports fans. More women watch the games than men, and for the women, they're less interested in the result and more interested in the journey. It's sort of like the ultimate reality show and miniseries wrapped into one." Just a quick calendar check, NBC. This is 2016. And John Miller, wasn't it the name that Donald Trump used when he impersonated a PR flack and called the New York Post?
Get your trivia skills ready for the Naked Truth.
And now this week's Naked Truth trivia question. After 6 months of hassling by a celebrity, which brand let loose on who this week? Answer at the end of the show. And now, page 2. Do you do any work? If you're online, you probably have come across your fair share of social media gurus. If you couldn't see the air quotes, they were there. You know them, the self-professed arbiters of knowledge about the latest craze like Twitter, Pokemon Go, or the like. The folks that are all over every channel, posting their snap code on Twitter or on Facebook or on Instagram and any other platform that'll have them, just to build up their numbers on Snapchat, you see. And any time a new app comes out or a new feature is released on an existing platform, there they are. Like Pavlov's dog salivating over the flavor of the week, and they're all over it with how-to videos and blog posts and live streams and webinars, ready to tell you everything you could possibly need to know about this great thing that was released yesterday. But there are a few things to note about this behavior that are worth pointing out. I'll outline what they are and articulate what you need to look for in a business counselor as you select your partners. First, this notion of being an expert or a guru is one thing I've never embraced. Maybe I'm old school, but I'm of the belief that expert status is something that is conferred upon you by your peers. It's something that is earned by doing the work and immersing yourself in a field of study. Malcolm Gladwell famously said that it takes 10,000 hours of dedicated practice to become world-class in any field of study. So when the world of social media was fairly new, and we suddenly had this whole group of experts, it wasn't because they put in the time, certainly. Now, I'm not saying that any of these people are not talented or that they're out to mislead anyone. They're very generous with their willingness to share knowledge and to help others see their point of view. We need more of that. But we also need some level-headed approach to the digital industry, particularly if we believe digital deserves a seat at the executive table. Which brings me to my second point. These immediate, knee-jerk reactions to product developments, these can be more detrimental than helpful. Yes, we need to be early adopters, of course, but this breathless and uncritical commentary about new apps or platforms is not only tiresome, but it can potentially damage reputations. Reputations of the individuals that are so worked up over yesterday's development, and reputations of their colleagues in the field who are taking a more deliberate and considered approach. When your aim is to show how smart you are by being the first one out the door, more often times than not, you sound silly. You sound like you're trying to prove something to your peers, to your boss, maybe to yourself. In such cases, you'd be better served to wait it out and let the old earth take a couple of whirls, as Frank Sinatra sang in September Song. When I was a young man courting the girls, I played me a waiting game. If a maid refused me with tossing curls, I'd let the old earth make a couple of whirls. Well, I plied her with tears in lieu of pearls. And as time came around, she came my way. As time came around, she came. One of the most sage bits of business advice that I ever received was from Andy, a boss I had some 15 years ago. As the CEO, Andy would sit in company meetings fairly stoic, letting everyone speak who was seated around the long, marble-topped table in the executive conference room. It was only toward the end of the meeting that he would say something, and his insights were always profound. Perhaps they were profound because he spoke quietly and deliberately. More likely, it's because he had the time to take everything in, to listen to the conversations happening, and to observe the body language around the room. It gave him time to piece together different viewpoints and formulate his own response. His advice was to do just as he did. Observe and listen. And wait until others have spoken to add your own perspective. It shows maturity and gravitas and confidence. And it's likely to be greeted with greater consideration by the individuals to whom you're speaking. Understanding trends and how new technologies fit into a strategic business plan takes thoughtfulness and a degree of analysis. And that doesn't come, or at least it doesn't appear to happen, from a SlideShare deck created within 12 hours of the launch of a new product. And while we're at it, who has time to create this kind of content on the fly when they're gainfully employed? A number of these so-called gurus claim to work for an organization, and yet the only updates I see on their streams are their advice and self-serving posts about these platforms, whether it's live video, Instagram stories, Snapchat, or whatever. I rarely see any of them sharing anything about the company they work for, or the progress that their teams have made, even when these individuals are supposed evangelists or marketing leaders for their companies. My own time at a Fortune 10 company was largely spent telling the company's story and ensuring people knew why I was so proud to work there. During that time, I also shared my own perspective on things, but I never let it overshadow or interfere with my primary responsibility. It's a balance, and I'm not so sure it's one that's being struck effectively by today's up-and-coming experts. Perhaps they need more role models. If you look around, a number of them all seem to be quoting the same small group of individuals. A diversity of thought, a diversity of experience, or of reading sources may go a long way to help the next generation of leaders. And don't even get me started on the ones that quote themselves in their own social media posts.
Allow myself to introduce myself.
There's nothing wrong with sharing what you know, just as there's nothing wrong with being known as an expert. But simply sharing what you know for the purpose of being considered an expert is when things start to get a little convoluted. If you're an expert, that'll be evident. If you're overly self-promotional, that'll be evident too. In our trivia question, we asked you which brand punked which celebrity. After months of being harassed by Kanye West, who wanted to be a furniture designer, IKEA let him have it, right in the Swedish meatballs. Be sure to check out other major stories from the August 8th edition of the newsletter, including a number of links around acquisitions and partnerships, such as Time Warner acquiring a 10% stake in Hulu for $583 million, and Viacom's potential purchasing of BuzzFeed to boost their digital relevance. And finally, why Walmart may be considering buying Jet.com to be more competitive with Amazon. In the collaborative economy section of the newsletter, you want to check out Jeremiah Aoyang's The 10 Types of Corporate Innovation Programs. A look at how large established companies are trying various programs to foster new innovations in an attempt to find the best way to change course for their big ships. And finally, the 7 mental models that you should know for smarter decision-making. These include the 10-10-10 rule, which looks at short-term versus long-term. Of course, Pareto's law, looking at being effective as well as being efficient. And, of course, the Eisenhower matrix, urgent or important, ranking things on a 4-square axis. Well, that's it for this week. With any luck, your brain's a bit bigger now. Thank you for making me a part of your week and for being exposed to the full Monty. Until next time, I'm Scott Monty, and I'll see you on the Internet.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe to the Full Monty newsletter and this program at FullMontyShow.com.
So we ran long. It makes up for episode 2.